Welcome to West Country Wanderings. Welcome to another one in my Lost Railway Walk series. Today we're in the county of Devon. In fact, we are in North Devon. We're back in the town of Barnstaple, as you can see there. And I'm going to be walking part of the old railway line that once went to another North Devon town, and that is Ilfracombe. There's many clotheslines in North Devon, lots and lots of them, and I hope to be covering some of the other ones here. Now this one would be part one of two, I would think, because there's a middle section of the old line which isn't walkable, and that was between Braunton, where we are going to be walking to a place called Morthoe, which changed its spelling. They added an E. I don't think that means it's now pronounced Mortyho, but it didn't have the E in the middle of it. But that bit you can't walk. You can walk from Morthoe into Ilfracombe, which is what I hope to do in a future video. Anyway, enough of that today. Today's walk, though, will be following the southwest coast path from here, and it's also part of the Tarka Trail. Now, if you're not familiar with the Tarka Trail, it's a bit of a weird thing. It's not a linear footpath, it's a figure of 8 shape, so it's kind of broken up and does weird things. Very strange. I think it's about 130 miles, but people do come here. It actually brings people into the town of Barnstaple and this area, using the hotels and campsites, caravanners, that sort of thing, to walk it. Presumably they do all of it at some time. We're only doing 5 miles of it today, and that's the section here, as I say, follows along the estuary of the River Tour. We'll be looking at a couple of other rivers as we go across. Hopefully there'll be some interesting scenery in the area as well. Now, before we leave the station incidentally is called Barnstaple now. It didn't used to be called Barnstaple, it used to be called Barnstaple Junction. So we're having a look at the station site here, because this was a very, very important hub for railways in this part of Devon. So hope you can join me on this wander here today in North Devon, following part of the former railway line to the town of Ilfracombe. Now, before I explain about the station site here, once how it looked here at Barnstaple Junction, or rather present day Barnstaple, just tell you a little bit about the history of this line before we go into a little bit more detail about the route itself as we follow along it. Now, the line started with another line coming here from the town of Crediton, and that opened here on the 1st of August in 1854. It was a broad gauge railway initially coming up from Crediton, where it met the line heading out of the city of Exeter. As I say, it was broad gauge, later become obviously standard gauge, later also to become double track. Today, of course, it was been reverted to single, more about that later. So this is how it started its life here. Now, they'd had plans to build a line to the town of Ilfracombe because it had been growing in Victorian times to become quite a prestigious and important holiday destination, and the roads in the area are poor. I say are poor because they still aren't great. You have to turn off the very, very busy M5 and up the North Devon Link Road, which always seems to be in a state of roadworks and never been finished. But it is much missed, now long gone. Buses from here take about 3/4 an hour. Now, the railway line was originally called the North Devon and Docks Railway Company Limited. Bit of a mouthful because they operated in the docks in this part of the area. Now, the line was worked by the Bristol and Exeter Railway Company, and later it was taken over by Thomas Brassey, who, well, he was actually the builder of the railway line. Not quite sure why he wanted to take it over, but he did. But that was only for a few years or so before the London and South Western Junction Railway then took over operations, initially leasing it from Thomas Brassey, but then purchasing the line outright. Well, that's so much for our line from Crediton and Exeter. What about our bit from Ilfracombe? And what about having a look around the station side here? When the original line from Exeter arrived, there was just the solitary platform that's still currently in use here, just running along there. But when the line to Ilfracombe was going to be opened, they needed to add some extra platforms. And that's what you can see there, the 2 island platforms, which are not currently in use. Now, down the end of the platform there were some very, very extensive goodyards and sidings. But not only that, there was a loop run by a different railway company called the GWR. Now, I've not heard of them either, but yes, that came in, and that was the loop off another railway line, and it was the line from the Somerset town of Taunton. Interesting line that, because there's no kind of road equivalent, there's no direct road from the town of Taunton to the town of Barnstaple today. But that's now all, again, sadly disappeared, and I don't think much of that line is walkable at all. So that came in at the far end of the platform here, quite lengthy platforms as well, as you can see. And as I say, there was goods down there and also a signal box. But let's go through 180 degrees. Now, today, of course, we're just faced with the buffer stops, but that wasn't originally the case. There were 2 lines disappearing off to the left. So I'll insert a couple of things now, a diagram of the station so you can see how it all relates. And that went off to a couple of other North Devon places, namely the town of Bideford and also to the town of Great Torrington. Interestingly, part of that is also covered by another section of the figure of 8 loop of the Tarka line. But our line going to Ilfracombe disappeared to the right, also going under the road, what was the A39, I think now part of Stickle Path Terrace, although you'll see a newer bridge there. It wasn't that one then, that's part of the present day bypass for the town here. But coming off to the right and then say tracks going off to the left. But today we've just got buffer stops. The building was actually designed by one Sir William Tite, who was chairman of the Exeter and Crediton Railway Company, as I say, opening in 1854. It's difficult to make out the route today, the start point, but we'll become clear as we carry on. It would have been round about here. So the 20th of July 1874, our first train arrived from the town of Ilfracombe, making its way down to here to the town of Barnstaple. 2 locomotives on that, 12 coaches, locomotives 282 and 283. The interesting thing to note about the railway after opening was that it was known as a light railway, similar to what we've got on heritage lines today. The maximum speed was only 25 miles per hour. That's changed around about 1888, I do believe. And the thing with that is that the average speed didn't really exceed 25 miles per hour. There were sections where they got up to about 40 or 50 miles an hour, but it was generally speaking quite a slow line, making the 14 miles north to the town of Ilfracombe. Now I'm just coming up to Stickle Path Crescent, heading into the town centre. This other thing worth noting is that the speed limit on the Ilfracombe branch, after leaving the junction all the way to a place called Pottington, which we'll see later in the video, was 15 miles an hour. A couple of reasons for that. It was a level crossing. There was also some sidings. Hopefully we'll be able to see where they left off to. A place called Raleigh Works. I think it might have been a joinery. I don't think it was anything to do with the Nottingham Cycle Company. Here, there is like a slight arch. Now I'm just wondering, this arch here, awful lighting, I know the sun's not on our right side today. It's probably went underneath this area here and then made its way across to Ilfracombe. But before it got on to the straight section following the estuary of the River Tour, it had to cross a bridge, quite a substantial bridge, and it was one of the principal costs of construction of the entire line. I think I've just found our first spot of railway infrastructure here, the Ilfracombe branch, which is these remainders of the broad gauge days. So we're starting our walk proper on the Tarka Trail now. It's also National Cycle Network routes numbers 3 and 27. The former arch is where the railway would have come through, round about there at Stickle Path. But now, of course, filled in, and the whole area landscape has completely been reprofiled. So our railway would have gone down there, but that's not the route of our cycle path. There's also a large lake there. That certainly wouldn't have been there when the railway was here, of course. There was also a level crossing in this area. See if I can find a photograph of that, put that in now. But of course the road network around here is completely changed since the days of the railway. Our footpath now splits. NCN 3 takes us back into the town centre, which is down that way, and then of course it would have gone over that bridge, which was quite an incredible building. So I think at this point I'm going to need to diverge away from the Braunton route and head down towards the town centre. I'm just wondering if those buildings ahead behind the traffic lights, which are currently on red, was the former Raleigh Cabinet Works. So yeah, because it's the only factory in the area, I think this was our Raleigh Cabinet Works here, siding to which opened in 1890, and our railway was coming on there, and still you can see the hump there from where it used to be. And this was the premises here, the factory, but more important than that is behind me. So this was the location of our iron girded bridge across the Tor estuary, River Tor here in Barnstaple. Obviously the traffic has to make way over that bridge there. And I have to say, I think it was rather ugly in construction design. But there are some impressive facts and figures. It had 30 main girders, each 40 foot in length, resting on wrought iron piers which sank deeply into the sands of the river bed. And I think that construction of it was rather problematic, not least of which to say rather expensive as well. It landed over there on the other side of the river, hence why you had that 15 mile an hour speed restriction, of course, for that because of the sidings and the level crossing, which is there just to the left of where it says T-Tor. You also had another railway station, and that was the station of Barnstaple Quay. Now rather oddly, the 3 and the 57, 59, the NCNs, which are alleged to follow the Tarka Trail, they're on the south side of the Tor here, but our railway was on the north side, so the Tarka Trail isn't actually following the railway line at all at this point. And I guess it has to make its way over that interesting bridge there, which was put in, I think, about 20 years ago, something like that, as a bypass towards the town of Ilfracombe because of all the extra traffic was generated by closing the railway. It's a little odd that it says Barnstaple Town here, because of course it should say Barnstaple Quay, although the actual site was a little bit further to the right, closer to the bridge. Now the problem with Barnstaple Quay station was that it wasn't big enough to serve the Ilfracombe trains, also the trains going along to the town of Taunton, so they needed to expand the space, but because of the river width here and other buildings in the area, they couldn't do it, so they built a new station further south called Barnstaple Town, which is what we're going to end up looking at now. But it's interesting that a lot of cyclists still to be using this route. I think they're discouraged from doing so because of the width of the pedestrian walkway across that bridge over the Tor. Plaque here courtesy of Barnstaple Town Council, obviously just recapping what we said about it arriving in 1854 and being extended to Ilfracombe in 1874. And I forgot to mention the length of that bridge was 213 yards long, and it also curved through 90 degrees. And at that time it was the sharpest degree turn of any railway bridge in the entire world. Reason for moving away from Barnstaple Quay railway station to a new one here at Barnstaple Town was the coming of another railway, not just the Ilfracombe railway, but another one to another place. The incredible thing about our line from here is that the station of Barnstaple Town has been completely preserved, including of course the signal box. So let's just have a walk through it. It's now the riverfront walk and also a walkway to the village of Wrafton. Amazingly, we still have the original station gates here at Barnstaple Town. It's wonderful to see. The first train left for Linton in 1898. The trains to Linton would have been left on this side, the opposite side to the river, and then curved round to the right, but I don't think you can make out the tracks of that. Gauge of it was 1 foot 11.5 inches. The last train ran in 1935, I believe, and got the photograph of the very last train coinciding with the ACE, the Atlantic Coast Express. And it's nice to see that there's a blue plaque there marking the site of the terminus of the Linton and Barnstaple Railway. I love how they've kept that sign. They're not sure if that's the original sign from Southern Railway days or not. It's interesting that there is an advert for steam trains at Woody Bay Station, which was on this line to, well, not our line to Ilfracombe, but the line to Linton. Now what we're coming up to next is another major feature of civil engineering on the line. There is known as Pottington Swing Bridge, or just simply Pill Bridge, and it allowed access to Pilton Quay and Roll Wharf, or Roll Quay, that's R-O-L-L-E. So we're now looking down on the River Yeo. I think that was Roll Quay over there, and it was actually served by a trailing siding coming off from the direction of Braunton on the other side of the river. Now this bridge here still swings, but it's not the original swing bridge. It did seem to be a rather kind of Heath Robinson affair, if I can say that. So the original swing bridge was 59 feet in length and 14 foot wide, and they had to have 3 members of the permanent way team to open it because it involved disconnecting fish plates on the track amongst many other things. Extraordinary. But yes, it was allowing boats to go up there up the River Yeo. So I'm not sure if those are remains of the original railway swing bridge, unfortunately. But this footpath was put in long before I think the Tarka Trail was conceived in 1989 by Barnstaple Town Council. It provides a wonderful walkway for people that live in the town. Now, if you live in and around the town of Barnstaple, I have a question for you which I can't really find online. Now, on the forums for railways, looking at old railways, often the line from Exeter to Barnstaple is known as the Barney line, which I've known for quite a few years. But it turns out that the town has another nickname, and that's called Bareham. And residents of the town of Barnstaple were known as Barehamites. So the question is that still the case? Is the town still known as Bareham, and do people that live from the town here still call themselves Baramites. There would have been another signal box here at Pottington to control that siding down to Roll Quay along the sides of the banks of the River Yeo tidal section there. But not only did it control that siding, it also controlled, of course, the rotational bridge here, railway bridge over the River Yeo. Very pleasant day here today, so hope you're enjoying the walk along here in North Devon. I always feel a bit more relaxed when I come away from the town centre, although we've got a little bit of traffic flowing over this road heading into Ilfracombe on the bypass. But yeah, so this is for cycle people, and I'm not sure if they join up, so people that will come the other way out of the railway station will link up with us shortly. But yeah, it must have been a great line to have travelled on, mustn't it? This beautiful scenery here following the River Tall here in Barnstaple, and what a pleasure it is. And obviously the traffic for the line, there were some goods on the line, but of course the bulk of it was seasonal holiday traffic to the town of Ilfracombe, and that meant there was fluctuations and it was quite quiet during the winter months. I'd love to know if you've done any of the lost railway walks that I've featured here on West Country Wanderings, here in the West Country. And yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. Obviously there are loads that I've not yet covered, particularly in this area. Maybe in the future, well hopefully in the future, we'll look at the section continuing on from Morthoe into Ilfracombe, and then perhaps have a look at the section from the town back there down at Barnstaple Junction over towards the town of Bideford. There is a Bideford Railway Heritage Centre there, so they've been doing some bits and pieces of that, and also there's a bit around the village of Instow, so hopefully I'll be able to cover that, but potentially probably next year, but it'd be great to be able to do this section here as well, going up to the town of Ilfracombe. But it would have been a great line on that. We'll talk some more about the history of the line and how it came to be, and also some of the trains that once went on the line from London Waterloo to Ilfracombe here in Devon. Actually here is where our line head off down to Roll Quay. Also was it called Pilton Wharf as well, and there are a couple of broad gauge rails there propped up against the gate of the Bradford sponsored rugby ground. Now here for the next 2 miles, our railway track heading towards the town of Ilfracombe was built on quite a substantial embankment. In fact, it's over quite marshy ground, as you can see if we look back towards the River Tor there. So this would have been no mean feat, although there's no cutting here, there's no tunnel at this part. There is a tunnel later on, not in this section today, but before you get to the town of Ilfracombe. This would have been easy, and it was one of the reasons why there was that nearly 20-year gap between the railway arriving in Barnstaple and another railway being built to Ilfracombe. One of the reasons that they could not agree on the route, because the ground going towards Ilfracombe gets tricky. Apart from the marshy ground here, it gets very, very hilly indeed. In fact, the station itself in Ilfracombe wasn't in the town centre, it was high above town. I can't remember how many feet, quite a few hundred feet above the town centre, because you couldn't get it right into like the high street or by the harbour there, because it'd be just too big a gradient to get through. So that was what they couldn't agree. They had two routes in mind. One was known as the western route, another one known as the eastern route. What they eventually came up with was a bit of a compromise, because we got this which goes to Braunton, which is heading in a kind of, well, it's following the Tall, isn't it? So when I'm in this part of Devon, I'm never sure, although we're in North Devon, never sure exactly which way is striking north, because obviously we're looking out to, or we'll be looking out to sea later on. But anyways, we're following the River Tall straight into the valley there, and then we're going to be going on in another direction, and it swings up through 90 degrees to head up to Morthoe, and then it does another like a wiggle, following a deep cutting through that tunnel, which I think was called Slade, and making its entrance there on a very high plateau. So it was quite wide to have lots of sidings there for the very long holiday traffic serving the town of Ilfracombe, and also for goods as well. After the railway to Ilfracombe opened in 1874, traffic was actually higher than been predicted or budgeted for. It had been built as a single track railway, in fact, as a light railway. Well, two things needed to improve. They needed to improve the overall speed, but also they needed to improve the capacity. So around, I think, 1886, 1887, there was a plan to double the track width from Barnstaple Junction to the town of Ilfracombe, although they couldn't extend it from Barnstaple Junction to just beyond to Pottington. That always remained single track, and the reason, of course, that, well, a couple of reasons. You got that level crossing, you got that bridge on the 90-degree curve, and also you got that little swing bridge there back at Pottington. So that remains single track throughout, but it did get widened. Prior to that, the only passing place, I believe, was at Wrafton, which did have two platforms, even in the single track era. But yeah, continue along here. In 1888, the whole thing was reopened as double track from Pottington right through, I do believe, to the town of Ilfracombe, which again wouldn't have been a cheap undertaking, because having to dig out sides of the cuttings that they'd already previously dug, not 10 or 11 years previously, but they did, and obviously it was worthwhile. It's lovely hearing the sounds of the salt marsh and wading birds along the River Tor. The passengers travelling along it, though, wouldn't have heard that, although they could have travelled on two luxurious trains, the Ace and the Bell. Yeah, what were they all about? Well, the Ace, first of all, was the Atlantic Coast Express, leaving from London Waterloo and heading here to Ilfracombe, but not quite, because I believe at one time it was the world's most sectioned or partitioned off. I don't know if you've ever been on a train and it might say something like, for Edinburgh you need to be in the front 6 coaches, Glasgow the rear 6, and it splits en route. It happens in the West Country sometimes, and you need to make sure you're in the right portion of the train. Well, unbelievably, the Ace split between 8 and 9 times. It had different sections, so it left altogether from London Waterloo, and then it split off, not only to serve here to Ilfracombe, but also to Torrington and Bideford and Bude in Cornwall, and places further south in East Devon like Exmouth and Seaton. So yeah, they were about between 8 and 9, and it was quite a luxurious train. The travel time from London Waterloo to Ilfracombe took just over 5 hours, because after the doubling in 1888, the restriction of it being a light railway order was taken away, because they'd improved the track, they'd improved the quality of it. Oh, just something to point out here, this is really good. Talking about the Ace, is that gradient marker? Look at that, still in existence there. I think it says 1456868, so the gradient, so there isn't much of a drop in gradient at this point, but that's really great to see that, isn't it? But yeah, the Ace, one of the 2 former named trains run by the later Southern Railway after grouping of the 4 big railway companies in the 1920s. After the success of the Ace here on what later became the Southern Railway, after it was the London South Western Junction Railway, was another titled train, and that was the Devon Bell, of course, which opened in June 1947. It was an observation car, and I'm not sure, I think it closed maybe late 1950s, early 1960s. However, one of them survives here in the county of Devon, and you'll find that on the Pottington and Dartmouth Steam Railway, so you can actually still travel on it for a little bit of extra cost on your journey down to the beautiful town of Dartmouth, which is of course where West Country Wanderings originally began. 4.5 years ago. I think another one of them went up north into a different country, in Scotland, in the Highlands I believe, and it was used for a Highland observational unit there. I'm not sure if that still exists now, but yeah, so that must have been fantastic, because you've got the beautiful views alongside the River Tor here. On the journey down, it would have been exceptional having that. That train took a little bit longer, but you probably wouldn't mind if you had all the stunning view. It took about 5.5 hours from Waterloo to Ilfracombe. Operational costs of the line to Ilfracombe would not have been cheap, because of the various signal boxes on it and many level crossings as well. So it would have had quite high maintenance costs. Cool. Got this embankment here, got the tunnel slade there, and also you've got two rather high infrastructure bridges, that 90-degree curve one going across the Tor and the other one going across the Rio. There is a smaller bridge, I think, we're still yet to come, but yeah, it wouldn't have been cheap. And of course, in the winter time, although there was some freight, passenger numbers would have been rather low, although people would have used it. The other thing that always strikes me is that we talk about the golden age of the railways, but I tend to think we kind of have almost that now. You're probably thinking that's a bit of a strange thing for me to say. In terms of frequency of service, at the moment there's an hourly service from Barnstaple, what was Barnstaple Junction, to Exeter, and there is a potential that could increase to half hourly at some point in the future, which would be really, really great. It's a very well patronised line these days. But if we go back to when we had the Ilfracombe line, there was only about 3 or 4 trains a day from Barnstaple to Ilfracombe. Now, if you're wanting to go shopping, that's probably fine, but to try and fit that in around the needs of workers, well, it probably wasn't that great for you. In my notes, it says to look out for this. Unfortunately, my map is playing up on my phone, so I think, but I'm not 100% certain, this is Ashford. I think it's got one of those folly gates there, isn't it? And at Ashford, I think potentially is that. I'll check that when I'm doing the edit. And there's something ahead of us, I believe, that our railway went over at this point. According to my notes, it says there was a road bridge under the railway track here, and I think it's been remodelled for flood defence purposes, but it could well have been like a little track to do what those gentlemen are doing on the salt marshes over there right now. I must admit that North Devon isn't a part of Devon that I know particularly well, because I've never holidayed here, so I've never had a chance to explore it properly. Well, kind of on the North Devon Cornwall border a while ago, but not in this part around Barnstaple, Ilfracombe, Bideford, that kind of area. And I don't know it that well. I know South Devon a lot better, I'll be honest with you with that. And but one of the things that did strike me when I was researching around Braunton, a place I've never been to, so I'm walking to Braunton for the first time today to have a look at that, is that in Braunton there was a canal, or rather it was a canalised section of a river. Now, I'm not sure the pronunciation of the river. I'll give you the spelling and then you can tell me exactly how it's pronounced. It's spelt C-A-E-N. So is that Cane? I'm not sure. Keen. Let me know. It's one of those hard ones. You'll know locally how you pronounce the name of the river, but it was straightened and it gave access from the village of Braunton down into the estuarial River Tor, and then of course out into the sea. So that would have been really useful for the economy, the village of Braunton, and I believe that was quite a late one. That didn't happen until around 1850. Interesting to note how wide the River Tor has got now. Now we've left the town of Barnstaple, approximately 3 miles back behind me. One of the things the railway did later on was go past a military airbase. Yes, I'm talking about RAF Chivener, which served a purpose in the Second World War. And I remember it when I was in the Air Force in the 1980s as being a base, a major base for T1 Hawks. And they did that between, I think it was 81 to early 1990s. There was also an air-sea rescue you'd often hear on the local TV news there, West Country News on TSW. Do you remember that, TSW? And they would mention if there'd been somebody rescued, they would mention either Chivener or Coldrose, of course, Helston on the Lizard down there. It closed as an RAF base in, I think it was 1995, and it's now an RMB, so it's a marine base for the Royal Marines, but also it's still an active airfield used occasionally by the Royal Navy and still by the Royal Air Force as and when required, but it's mainly a commando base for the Royal Marines. So that there is Strand House. Now earlier on I think I said Ascot, that was the hill. I think it was something like, it's not, that one I showed was Colcott, something like that. I'll insert the map now so you can see post-edit what it is. And this is the railway bridge that I was talking about. Here was also for a stream and a track leading out onto the salt marshes. The best we've seen of the engineering of the former Ilfracombe line so far, I feel. I was really pleased to capture that bridge there. So I don't think that if I'd been whizzing past on a bike, well, I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have known it was there. Some great notes. I've got a book which it's given me a lot of history to this line. But seeing that house there, thinking it must be something around there, and then there's some concrete steps that take you down to it, and then you can see that amazing structure, that bridge, just on effectively the River War, the tidal River War, or the River Tor, to allow access to the fishermen onto the river bank. And I think it was part of an agreement for this railway to have been built. They wouldn't have allowed the railway to have been built blocking off their access to the tidal marshes so they can fish for whatever they fish. Maybe it's mussels, that type of thing. I'm not sure. If you're a fisherman, what do all these fishermen get out of the River Tor? Please let me know. But I'm really enjoying the walk. It's a great walk. Lovely, lovely day. We're over halfway to Braunton now, to the village of Braunton, which I understand is quite a large village. It still has a tourist element to it, and I think it's like one of the ways you get up to Croyd Bay, of course, which is a major surfing capital of North Devon. So yeah, we'll carry on and see what else we can see railway-wise of our line to Ilfracombe. Now I'll have to do some work on the edit or research, and when I'm doing the editing on this bit here, there's a large open space here. Now, was it used for railway purposes? Because you've got down there, it goes right out into the estuary of the River Tor. So I'm just wondering if this bit had railway use. Was there a siding here? I'm not sure. The next station, our line out after leaving Barnstaple Quay, later of course became, or rather moved to, Barnstaple Town Station with the opening of the Linton and Barnstaple narrow gauge railway, was not where you think it might be, where we're going to, Braunton, but a place called Wrafton. It's about a mile to the south of the village of Braunton. We also have at this location, apologies for the traffic noise here, our first bridge going over the railway since leaving Barnstaple Junction. Now, I'm a little bit puzzled at this point as to what that bridge going over the railway actually served, because it comes to an abrupt end, and you might be thinking, that's an abutment and it carried on. and on and on and on and on and on over the river. Well, I'm pretty certain it didn't. I'm wondering if that isn't an abutment of a bridge, but in fact a lime kiln. And it provided access to the top of the lime kiln. And as we get closer to our bridge, yes, I think we can see that now. So the bridge then starts to go on a curve here. And then I think that's our lime kiln there. Sorry about the poor lighting. Well, I've managed to walk up the bridge. There is a footpath the other side I haven't climbed up directly. And I think our lime kiln in there, but it's a bit heavily overgrown, unfortunately. That's our bridge going over our line to Ilfracombe. And looking down from the top. And opposite direction towards the village of Braunton. And that's looking back down at track level in the direction back to Barnstaple Town, Barnstaple Quay, Barnstaple Junction. Absolutely gorgeous views here. This is my very first time to this part of North Devon. I can say I'm absolutely not disappointed. Yes, we have a rail here which is propping up a piece of metal and the concrete bank which is supporting the Tarka Trail. I've done it as a day trip today from where I live in Gloucestershire. The trouble is, it's the best part of well, more than 5 hours journey time to get here, and another 5 hours this evening to get back home again. But the views make it worth it. It's why I can't get to this part of the world that often, but I certainly hope to. Again, now we have another railway feature here, another gradient marker. This time telling us we've just been walking on the level. There, but now we're about to go downhill, but only a shallow gradient of 1026. Over that side, I think it's the start of IF Chivener. I'm not sure where that castellated building is though, but it's kind of over the other side of the road and the hedging there. And we're about probably about half a mile from our first site of our first station, and about another mile and a half to go before our final destination of Braunton. Braunton, of course, is famous for Braunton burrows. I've seen loads of Facebook images of that, and I think it's a place that people that live in North Devon desire to go to wander and stretch their legs on the sand dunes there. Sometimes, though, it is closed off for public access. It is red-edged on the OS map, marked as a danger area, flying flags, like we've seen at Warminster previously in Wiltshire, here on West Country Wanderings in a Manfred vlog, I remember that. And but it is beautiful and a great place for nature. Now this building here is actually Heaton Court, Heanton. It's now fine wines dining sort of place, but I believe when they were building the line to Ilfracombe, the person that owned this protested, because as you can see, there's the court there, there's the path, river to the right, and there's a track bed, so very, very close by, and cutting through, no doubt, his land, and he objected to it. But I got a feeling it was already in a ruinous state. It's not in a ruinous state now. I think it's a very nice place for a restaurant and that sort of thing. I think you do accommodation as well. And yeah, Heaton Court here, and I think it was one of the reasons for that 20-year delay of building the Ilfracombe line. Coming into Wrafton village, and the site of the first station on the line out of Barnstaple is our second overbridge. It was around this site here that was the site of Wrafton station. How do I know that? Well, I think it's because of this level crossing here, which is still a road going across the former railway trap road to Ilfracombe. Well, I haven't been able to film for a little while because we're next to RMB Chivener, and it's just over there, so I'm not filming that directly. I don't want to pick up any car registration plates or anything like that. We're carrying on down here. Now, of course, what we have left is the river. So the River Tor is a bit further to the south. Yeah, I always get my geography wrong now. That may not be right. It might be east, west. I'm not sure, because Barnstaple kind of points up a bit. It's not kind of right on the edge, if you see what I mean. I'll insert the map so you can see what I'm trying to say. But we're going to continue along this way, and I'll see if I can get a little bit of filming done on Braunton, a bit south on the Burrows, so we can see a little bit of the coast and the sea. But it's a beautiful walk, really, really nice walk, with a lot of bit of railway history thrown in as well. Wrafton church is up on the horizon behind me here. Now, RAF Chivenor didn't actually have a separate halt of its own to serve the needs of the airbase, but of course Wrafton Station was close by. What Wrafton Station did have was a siding for the RAF for any goods that were coming in, probably maybe POL. Ex-military know what that is, petrol or lubricants. And also there are camping coaches here as well, which seems a slightly strange place for camping coaches because you can't actually see the river from this place. Wrong about the site of Wrafton Station. It's actually here. This is the former station house, I do believe. Now, I'm not sure if that's the original signal or not, but it could well be. Also, I think a light and telegraph pole behind it. That's an extraordinary sight to see that. And it's double bonus because not only got a former station house and signal here at Wrafton, we've also got, yes, it's another gradient sign. So here we've got the site of another accommodation bridge going out towards down by the river there, which is sprung quite a surprisingly long way away from us now. And, you can also see the sides of it down here. Down there. So it's a combination bridge. Unfortunately I can't get access down to it. You can see bits of old rail. No idea what that is over there. Now, before we get to our final destination today, so hopefully we'll be able to do the section north of Morthoe into Ilfracombe another time. Before we get to that, just to tell you about how did this line come to be closed. It didn't happen all in one go. I think the rot set in 1963 when British Railways Western region took over the running of this line. It had previously been British Railways Southern region, which of course was the latter day stages of the old Southern Railway, the green arm, what is of course now known as the withered arm of the Southern Railway. And because the Western region, and a lot of people that worked in the Western region were ex-GWR men, based at Swindon of course, they always felt that the Southern region, Southern Railway, was a rival to theirs. So they had no real interest in maintaining the high standards that the Southern men and ladies had running this railway to Ilfracombe. So I think that was the start of it. Now, the big nail in the coffin was the following year. First of all steam services were removed off the line and began DMU operation. No more ACE specials coming through to Ilfracombe. Not only that, but also all goods services were removed from all of the stations, and that was a real painful blow to the line, and things then sadly went downhill from there. The line eventually became singled, and in 1969, after the beaching cuts, it wasn't actually a beaching one that closed the line. It was said that the line was going to be closed. Some money had been given, a grant from the then government, to maintain the line from Exeter to Barnstaple. Of course that stays open today, and of course how I arrived here today. But all the branches shooting off from Barnstaple Junction, well, they've long gone now. So when was the last train? 5th of October 1970 at 7 p.m. I do believe a train set off from the town of Ilfracombe to Barnstaple. It was to be the last one ever, well certainly for passengers anyway. A very sad day to what had become at one time an important source of income for the Southern Railway, and before that the London and South Western Junction Railway. It was a sad end. It wasn't quite the end, because in 1975 a maintenance special ran back up the line. Heaven knows what state it must have been after 5 years of no maintenance on it. But it did, and they looked at it and then obviously realised, this is going to cost a heck of a lot of money to maintain. Literally a few months after that, train ran up, they decided to close the whole thing for good and rip or track up, and I think it'd all be gone by 1976 or 1977. Now just making our final approach to Braunton along the track bed, which is on a bit of an embankment here because of the river, which is just down there. Sorry for the flare of lighting. Since you last meet, I've actually made another video in my canal series, a short bike canal series looking at the Kyne Canal. So if you want to check that one out, have a look at my channel, and you should find that there. Should be coming up in the next few days, I would think. But yeah, it's been a delightful walk here. along the Tarka Trail. I think this is the first time we featured the Tarka Trail here on West Country Wandering, but I hope to be featuring it again. Let's make our way into the village centre to wrap this video up. So that's the end of our trail here in Braunton. It brought us to Station Close. No sign of the station itself. There was a minor level crossing here, and I think another one at the other end of the station. But we do have another signal post here. Well, with the signal post behind me, that's it for today here on West Country Wanderings, one of my Lost Railway walks following the line to Ilfracombe, well, to Braunton here in North Devon. Hopefully we'll be able to do the section from Morto up into the town itself next time, and then perhaps we'll look at the other line down towards Bideford and Instow and Great Torrington as well. Hope you enjoyed it today. Hope you see you on the channel again very soon. All the best for now. Cheers. Goodbye.